Okay, thank you for joining the Montana Book Festival for this presentation of Anything Will Be Easy After This by Bethany Maile. My name is Lauren Korn. I'm here on behalf of the festival, and I'm so excited to welcome you to this year's virtual events. As I said, I'm here today with Bethany Maile. She's going to be chatting about and reading from Anything Will Be Easy After This. She's a professor of writing at Boise State University. Her work has been published in Shenandoah, the Rumpus, River Teeth, Prairie Schooner, High Desert Journal, and the Normal School. Welcome, Bethany.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be part of Montana Book Fest. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. I'm going to read a little bit today. We'll talk a little bit about the book as we work our way through that. I don't think there's too much to say up front because I'm just going to jump in right at the top. So we start with a chapter called Going West. The commands were familiar. Tray tables, seat belts, emergency exits, oxygen masks, save yourself first. I didn't pay attention. It was 5:30 a.m. and I had a long day ahead. Boston to Chicago, Chicago to Salt Lake, a 4-hour layover, and then finally Salt Lake to Boise, Idaho. It would be dark. The Treasure Valley would be a constellation of city lights, all of Ada County, the Little Dipper. Outside the window, Boston was a cross-hatching of harbor lights, street lights, headlights, flashing billboards, a skyscraper lit to read Go Sox. The Big Dipper, Hydra, the Milky Way. The plane leveled out, takeoff over. Tray tables lowered, seats reclined. I pulled out a copy of Ginsberg's collected works. He's the shit, a boy in my literature class had told me. Keep it. Hal was the only thing I recognized. In dreams, you walk dripping from a sea journey on the highway across America in tears to the door of my cottage in the western night. A western cottage, my parents' home, their wraparound porch and horse pasture, the alfalfa fields that fringed evil Idaho, the broad face of the Boise Mountains, the blue basins of the Owyhees. A dream. I envisioned that wide prairie sky, nothing like the slivers between Back Bay skyscrapers. I pictured my mare bucking at low thunder. I saw Clint Eastwood pull a 6-gun. I heard Loretta Lynn's trembling, jangling voice. I smelled spring thaw and wet hay. I barreled toward the Wild West, an illusion, a myth, on a journey with no destination. So in that moment, I have just dropped out of college in Boston. I am returning to my hometown, having sort of misremembered it willfully as this Wild West wonderland, even though it's very much a farm town that's kind of transmorphed into a nouveau riche, glitzy suburb. In the book, I flail around in that moment for a little bit, and then I end up in Tucson, Arizona, where I go to graduate school. But even there, I have departed again, but I carry with me still that deeply flawed but deeply romantic vision of my home in the West. And that problematic misperception compels me to go back to Idaho and participate in just this wide variety of kind of bizarre Western events. So I attend cattle auctions, I ride the plains looking for Mustangs, I attend a ladies' night at the shooting range, and in the book's title chapter, I spend a week trailing Idaho rodeo queens as they compete for the state's biggest title. And it's the longest chapter of the book, so we'll read from it, but sort of selectively. But for now, I'll just start at the top of that chapter. And then as we piece our way through it, I'll kind of break for context. Anything will be easy after this. Preparation. Summers in Idaho are rodeo season. Beyond the Treasure Valley, in the hills, on the plains, in Blackfoot or Riggins or Burns, pickups line ditches. Women wear jean skirts and pink boots. Men don hats and gloves. Slouched in the stands, they nurse buds and share nachos. The weak-stomached grow woozy from the deep pungencies of hops and reheated hot dogs, boot polish and Old Spice. In the corral, toddlers cling to bolting sheep. Cowboys ride broncs bareback. Pretty women with sashes pinned to their chests circulate among the crowd. A crown shines from their hat brims. The Whitebird Rodeo Queen, the Gold Dust Rodeo Queen, the Whoopie Days Queen. In the circle, the queens reign supreme. Rodeo queens are the princesses of Idahoan childhoods. Parents load up their kids and take them to the Caldwell Night Rodeo, the Jordan Valley Rodeo, the Snake River Stampede, and young girls come expecting more from the queens than anyone else in the show, and the queens deliver. They pose for pictures and perch on chute gates and cheer when a rider lasts 8 seconds. Young girls stare on, entranced by those piled coiffures, by those blouses that shimmer in the sun. Then, flying from the chute, a queen on horseback. Her hair waving behind her, she sprints around the ring, a strange concoction of powdered femininity and deep-muscled strength. I should also note that in this chapter, I use the sort of side notes, and maybe you've seen in a lot of essays footnotes where you kind of have a parallel narrative running beneath the main text. This functions very similarly. They're just offset to the side, and you'll know that I've shifted into that kind of tandem narrative. I'll just say side note, or I'll hold up a finger and we'll shift back and forth. Each summer the queens take to the ring. Girls truck in from every corner of the state, spurs polished, hair bleached. They compete for the state's most coveted title, Miss Rodeo, Idaho, and this year the competition falls in the middle of my visit. The timing is serendipitous. I contact the MRI pageant coordinator and explain that I'm a writer exploring my Idaho roots and consequently rodeo queens. Summers spent in sun-hot bleachers with the staticky calls of fast-talking announcers and bull riders spinning to the sod have left me enchanted with this leather-fringed microcosm. The coordinator, in a familiar gesture of Idaho congeniality, indulges me. After a week of emails, I receive a press pass to all events, access to the girls around the clock, and the MRI 2011 Contest Rules Handbook. On the book's cover is a picture of the current Miss Rodeo Idaho, Amber Jackson. Queen Amber stands next to a pine tree. She wears a crown fixed to a black cowboy hat and a rhinestone-studded leather vest. Thick makeup and red lips and teased hair add 2 decades to the 19-year-old, but she smiles on sweetly. I'll break here for 1 second to grab water. It's like a very premature intermission. Thank you. Okay, criteria, side note. These and other stipulations noted here have been pulled from the Miss Rodeo Idaho 2011 Contest Rules Handbook, naturally. Must be born a female, no younger than 18 and no older than 25. Must be single, must never have been married, must never have been pregnant, must not live with someone of the opposite gender who is not a relative. Side note, informally, boyfriends lived with or otherwise are frowned upon. Few queens offer a concrete explanation for this guideline. They just shrug and say, everyone knows to introduce him as your cousin. All the queens have cousins. Must hold a high school diploma or an equivalent degree, must not commit or have committed crimes of moral turpitude, must not harm Miss Rodeo Idaho's reputation. Miss Rodeo Idaho is, the rule book stipulates, the ideal Western American young woman. Side note, ideal, a word worth consideration. Certainly MRI's notions of ideal are very specific, though the word here remains undefined. Common definitions locate the term as something existing as an archetypal idea, as in ideals equal morals or beliefs, or ideal as something existing as a mental image or in fancy or imagination only, lacking practicality. Like a fantasy, like a myth. Perhaps then here is why I have elbowed my way into observing the rodeo queen pageant. A first-generation Idahoan, I've situated myself somewhere between the rodeo queens of rural Idaho and the California transplants of Eagle. The competition is itself a sort of anthropological experiment. They're here to locate and thereby define what it means to be a certain ideal type of Western woman. What it means to be Western and a woman is at the heart of this competition, the heart of my infatuation with Idaho, and maybe even the heart of these pages. The entrance fee is $450, non-refundable. Historically, the contestants must hold a rodeo title. The process is sort of like being crowned Miss Boise and then competing for Miss Idaho. But the queens hate beauty pageant comparisons. Even though MRI refers to itself as a pageant, it is not a beauty pageant. They are quick to point out that nothing they do requires a bathing suit. The queens consider themselves more analogous to cheerleaders. They promote rodeos much in the same way a cheerleader promotes a football team, and both require major doses of athleticism. They do not, however, quote, prance around in skimpy bikinis, as one queen explained. All fundamental differences aside, the crowning process remains similar. For example, once crowned Miss Caldwell Night Rodeo, a girl could then compete for Miss Rodeo Idaho. Since MRI's 1956 inception, most years see over 60 applicants. Perhaps 25 make it to the final competition. This year, though, 3 girls applied. Of the 3, only 1 holds a rodeo title. The MRI board, desperate for a competition, told the other 2 girls if they could come up with sponsorships, they could compete. This year marks an all-time low in contestant applications. Side note, In truth, no one's certain of the numbers. The MRI institution, run by volunteers, does not keep close records. And when pressed to discuss the obvious curtailment of competition, nobody talks. What's certain, though, is that in the rodeos of my childhood, the ring was lined with MRI hopefuls. And this is the first year the MRI institution has accepted non-title holding competitors. Clearly, things don't look so hot for the MRI circuit. If accepted for the week-long competition, the queens traveled to Nampa, Idaho. Nampa requires a 20-minute drive from Eagle, and it looks like Eagle did 30 years ago. Most people drive pickups, there are still farm fields between subdivisions, and generally people in Eagle avoid Nampa because there are gangs and because the sugar beet factory stinks the whole town up. Side note, regarding gangs, kind of. Some stop signs are spray painted. As for the bad smell, this claim is less arguable. People in Nampa avoid Eagle because it's crawling with all those damn yuppies. The queens never leave Nampa. While competing, the queens are not allowed to access any of the following: computers, cell phones, friends, or family. Side note, the family stipulation makes sense. Like beauty pageant contestants, apologies for the comparison queens, rodeo queens' mothers can be overbearing. Most girls began cleaning before they learned to read, and their mothers have been instrumental in teasing their hair, painting their nails, and quizzing them on horsemanship trivia. MRI makes a point to exclude this kind of influence. They may not wear their crowns ever. They will wear the banners provided by the MRI organization. They may ride their own horses in parades, but not in competitive events. The queens travel, eat, and sleep together. Historically, drama of the standard teen girl variety has ensued. This year, however, the contestants appear cordial and chatty and friendly. They lend one another lip gloss and help each other pin their banners in place. The perk of a three-girl competition, it seems. Contestants. Abby Bowler is thin as a rope with a long, sloping face. A mass of Barbie blonde hair falls past her shoulders, and she always sports false eyelashes. Abby is from Ingham, Idaho, a town of 206 families. She wants to be Miss Rodeo, Idaho because she is committed to, quote, projecting the image of a wholesome, all-American girl with high moral values and character. Side note, wholesome plus all-American, question mark, plus moral values plus character equals ideal. Abby speaks with a high, thin voice and seems genuinely, undeniably sweet, though this might be a result of the eyelashes, which she bats masterfully. Casey Quibb holds the Meridian Lions Rodeo Queen title and radiates confidence. She speaks loudly with a deep, rasped voice and is clearly a seasoned competitor. She never stops smiling. In fact, she smiles so constantly, it can look pained. She is also always posing, standing heel to toe, hands tucked behind her back, and when she walks, her gait is some strange combination of delicate modeling and graceless strength. She is short and broad and looks really strong. She is solid, straight to the hips and waist and rippled with muscle. Casey wants to be Miss Rodeo, Idaho because she will, she says, quote, be a role model for young girls and give them a future filled with hope and desire. I could help more people understand rodeo and how it can be an exciting event for the family as it captures the imagination and nostalgia of the cowboy era in America. Side note. Consider the words Casey uses: imagination, nostalgia. Here we have one of the few, perhaps only suggestion that the cowboy era no longer exists in Idaho. It seems the MRI folks believe in Idaho, it's still defined by thriving cowboy culture, regardless of its depleted cattle industry, vanishing farm fields, boarded up slaughterhouses, and quickly sprouting shopping malls. Not to mention that MRI itself only had 3 contestants this year, that ghastly low. Courtney Gilbert is visibly young and visibly nervous. Like the other queens, she is all smiles all the time, but beneath hers lies a hint of undeniable terror. She keeps her hands in her lap, as is advisable, but her fingers never stop dancing. She is a natural deep blonde and wears less makeup than the other 2 girls. Courtney stands out for her simple, relatively plain styling. She wears too bright blush, but no foundation, and freckles dapple her nose. She is thin, and her shirts haven't been tailored as carefully as the other girls, and beneath her rhinestones ooze visible clumps of glue. She is 18 and claims to be a cowgirl with many talents. Courtney wants to be Miss Rodeo, Idaho because, she says, it will be, quote, an honor and one I'm going to work hard for, to be a part of Idaho's history and knowing I did many helpful things to help others. She also wants to become a psychologist and hypnotist because what better way to aid her fellow man, quote, unquote. They all tease their hair, which is a given. After the trademark chopping wave, rodeo queens are known more for their enormous barrel curls than anything else. They always, regardless of a liberally applied perfume, smell like Aquanet. They are all from Southern Idaho. They all have college aspirations. They have all competed as queens before. They are all supremely kick-ass on a horse. Collectively, they barrel race, goat tie, pole bend, and train horses. They are undeniably tough. The queens have been double kicked in the chest, the side, and the back. They have been bucked off and rolled on. They have been bitten. They have bitten horses' back. Side note. I learned the best way to cure a horse's biting problem is to bite it back hard on the tender, meaty curve of its muzzle. They have punched misbehaving horses straight across the face. They have been flung from the saddle. They have landed hard. Side note. As the queens roll up their sleeves and trace scars, I keep quiet. I've been bucked and nipped, certainly, but I know our war stories are not the same. In a pissing contest, regardless of severity of wound, I lose for this reason. All my injuries were my fault. I raced a hungry Arabian through an alfalfa field, was bucked, and then crashed on the saddle's horn. I broke an arm after jumping a horse saddled in too long stirrups. I chipped a bone, here the most embarrassing and most recent, after rolling from a still standing, loose cinched horse. These girls have seen the same bruises and bangs, but their animals were wild, new to bridles and reins and a spur's stab to the flank. Maybe this feeling of inadequacy is more deeply seated than I'd like to admit. An old boyfriend of mine, an alfalfa farmer, had a sister-in-law who was an ex-queen. She never broke costume, always sporting snug jeans and big buckles and stiff curled hair. She talked about breaking horses and punching cattle, and I cowered in her presence. Able only to ride trail horses drained of their zest, I felt useless. In the company of the queen, I was a woman impotent in all things Western. They all wear Western attire, hats and wranglers and handmade blouses dripping in rhinestones, and the outfits always match. For example, on the first day of the competition, Casey wears robin's egg blue wranglers, a matching polyester blouse with a longhorn rhinestone in the back, and boots spray painted the same shade of blue. The girls buy cheap boots, $5 a pop, so they can spray paint them the exact right hue, and they use car paint because it yields the glossiest sheen. Side note. The girls whisper that Abby packed 80 pairs of carefully painted boots. I can't help but think of my own penchant for boots, though I wear them only for fashion's sake and wouldn't dream of wearing them anywhere near a horse. I splurge on well-crafted handmade boots, Fry's or Old Gringos, and on this front, I'd hoped we could talk shop. Of course, the queens know all about ropers and whites and every other brand, but nice boots don't pertain to queening. That's a different part of their lives. And I'm sure each pair of their boots have stains and spur scratches and probably look all the cooler for it. On formal days, they wear leather gowns, long-sleeved, high-necked dresses made of oiled and buffed cowhide and dyed in every shade, emerald, eggplant, maroon. Until the 1980s, queens were never allowed out of them. The gowns are sold at saddle stores or bought on eBay or handed down from ex-queens. The dresses circulate. Most girls have worn a competitor's gown at some point in time. They are all long-sleeved. They are all tight through the legs. The queens shuffle around in these columns of leather. They are all decorated, usually with rhinestones and scalloped hemlines, though some boast fringe. On the skirt of one of Courtney's dresses, she has embroidered the entire state of Idaho, complete with mountain bluebirds and syringas and spuds. At rodeos, they sweat uncontrollably. Comfort is one of the many things the queens sacrifice. Beneath gowns or denim, they wear Spanx and pantyhose, considerable additions given they circulate rodeo rings in the driest, hottest months. They wrap their feet in grocery bags so they slide more easily into boots. Their scalps are scarred from bobby pins slicing their skin, and the pins are not a cosmetic decision. If a rodeo queen's hat flies off during competition, she is penalized points and fined $50. The queens bobby pin the hell out of their hats, hitching the band deep into their scalps. They all hate the big hair. So we sort of go over next how the queens are judged, which is in 4 real categories. That's horsemanship, congeniality, appearance, and personality. And then I trail the queens for the rest of the week as they basically compete and perform. So they model, they give interviews, they ride in parades, but everybody sort of agrees in the queening community that horsemanship is the real meat and potatoes. So I'd like to drop in for just a scene of the queens competing on horseback. Horsemanship. The girls have 10 minutes before their next event. They move at this clip all week. The queens rise as early as 3 a.m. It takes at least 2 hours to get ready in the morning for some events like the Buckaroo Pancake Feed start at 5 a.m. They shuttle from judged events to convalescent homes to elementary schools, and at night they rehearse their coronation dance till after midnight. Such ass busting seems inhuman. After the interviews, they go downstairs to the rodeo ring for the horsemanship competition. Side note, I know nothing about horsemanship save the basics. My father, the horseman in my family, taught me the necessities: how to get where you want to go, what to do if the horse spooks or bucks, spin the horse if you can, try to jump if you can't. Sophistication of this sort is beyond my comprehension. Because of my confessed ignorance, an MRI board member watches the event with me. She is, like most of the people on the board, an ex-queen. Her hair is cropped but still teased at the roots, and she wears lime green boots with snug jeans and a pink pearl snap blouse. This event requires that each girl memorize 3 different patterns around the corral. The horses the queens will direct today aren't even trained for this type of riding. They're team rope horses, trained to chase cattle, totally unaccustomed to the sophisticated rein commands the queens will be demanding. Side note, first thing to consider, my correspondent tells me, is that these girls don't get to ride their own horse, don't even get to see this horse until showtime. I nod. You ride? She asks me. I tell her I get by barely, if at all. So you can appreciate how tall an order that is, she says, and I nod again. I ask my correspondent if it's dangerous. Of course, horses are unpredictable animals and these girls are asking a lot of them. When asked if a girl's ever been hurt, she says, these girls are good enough to know what to do in a pinch. I remember all my falls from panting trail horses. I remember the stupidly snapped arms, deep tissue bruises, chipped bones. I wouldn't make it out of that chute. They must walk the horse into the corral, mount, execute all the patterns, and then run a buzz. Side note. If rodeo queens are known for anything aside from the hair, it's galloping around rodeo rings at unbelievable speeds, balancing an enormous flag and waving. The wave is not a relaxed, princessly wave. It is a rigid chop, timed with the horse's rhythm. Every rodeo starts this way. This is the buzz. Each pattern requires flying lead changes, spins, stops, and reversals. Side note. The lead changes are a big deal. If there's anything my correspondent discusses, it's lead changes. Essentially, when a horse turns, its inside legs should reach farther than the outside. Both front and hind legs must do this. This is accomplished through well-timed taps of the rider's heels and slight shifts in the rider's hips. It's a lot harder than that sounds, my correspondent tells me. It is not enough to just stop the horse. The queens must make the horse stop on a dime from a full gallop. The horse's legs stiffen straight ahead and the animal slides through sod, dirt flying. For a moment, the queen disappears in a cloud of dust. Catapulting seems imminent, all that velocity unstoppable. It's frightening to watch. The Idaho Center's 12,000 seats are empty, save a clutter of 20 or so queening fans. Side note, even in MRI's heyday, when nearly 10 times as many girls competed, I can't imagine the stands looking any less empty. Maybe 100 fans instead of 20, still a drop in a bucket. The girls sneak waves to their families and head to the chutes to meet the horses. The judges sit behind a rodeo announcer who, despite the tiny crowd, has all of the Idaho Center's audio system fired up and echoing. The announcer booms portions of Abby's biography, how she's a student at Idaho State University and owns her own stationery company. Abby walks to the center of the ring and mounts. In so doing, she grabs the back panel of the saddle and a judge tisks. A quick deduction for sure. Abby runs her pattern and cuts the arena into uneven halves. She struggles for her lead changes and wrestles the horse into reverse. On her final lap, she turns and waves at the judges. Her buzz is fast, but not too fast, and the flag remains perfectly straight at her hip. Her hair flies behind her, and she's a blur of blonde and sparkle. Casey leads her horse from the chute, and the small crowd erupts in applause. One MRI board member, in a moment of undisguised favoritism, claps. Casey runs her patterns and struggles for a lead change, but finally gets it without having to look down or stop the horse. The MRI members whisper about the lead changes and the flying stops and the way Casey sits in the saddle. They call Casey Case. The members clap and say she made a few mistakes, could have mounted a little more cleanly, could have gotten the lead changes more quickly, but she got there. Courtney mounts, and like Abby and Casey, she grabs the back of the saddle. Such an easy mistake, everyone is surprised. Courtney lopes around the arena and bounces from her saddle. She's used to riding Arabians, one MRI member says. They travel differently. On the quarter horse, Courtney springs from the horse's back. Other than her sloppy positioning, her ride is the strongest. From the stands, Courtney's nervous smile isn't visible. The horse spins when she pulls it to spin. The horse leads with the left when Courtney taps her heel. She shifts from lope to trot to gallop at all the right times. She yanks the reins and the horse flies to a stop. She doesn't hesitate for a moment and the horse obeys. She has nothing but confidence. Courtney finishes her ride and dismounts and leads the horse to the chute. She didn't turn to the judges, one observer points out. She had a good ride, kept coming out of that saddle, but a good ride. An MRI chaperone takes the girls from the chutes directly to a van, and they can only wave again at their families as they leave. Courtney and Casey chat as they cross the parking lot, relaxed and happy with their rides, and Abby is quiet. In the parking lot, the MRI members place bets. Most everyone agrees this category will come down to Casey or Courtney, but in general, they are impressed with each ride. All three are clearly good horsewomen. They were all poised and in control and rode along with a relaxed athleticism. At least we'll have a girl who can ride regardless, a board member says. Okay, so we will leave the queens in that moment of competition and shift to the final scene with them for today, at least. They're in the green room waiting at the coronation as the accountant tallies the final points. So they're about to be called back out, and the new MRI will soon be crowned. And in this scene, we have the reigning queen, who is about to pass her title, and a few junior queens who aren't competing, but have sort of milled around all week. So you might notice a few extra names. As the pageant winds down on stage, the queens slouch in the green room. There's nothing to do but wait, and where one would expect shaking legs and nervous chit-chat, there is only exhaustion. The queens pick at stale rolls. They peel open their chocolates. Abby listens to her iPod, and Courtney rests her eyes. Casey uses a flyer with her photo on it as a fan. Eventually, as the time to retake the stage nears, they repowder their noses, reblast their curls. Plum exhaustion has worn away all decorum, and they are relaxed, natural. No more eye bats from Abby or square shoulders from Casey or mile-a-minute jabber from Courtney. Casey gasses the room with hairspray and admits to fantasizing about lopping off all her hair. Every queen cops to harboring such visions. They bemoan the early mornings. Amber says there's a million times this year she wished she could have passed the crown. 10 months of travel, no breaks, she says, but you just gotta buck up, she concludes with corn-fed resolve. Paisley agrees queening can be a real pain, but she's had more interview practice and public speaking experience than any other 17-year-old she knows. Anything will be easy after this, she says, and all the queens nod in agreement. Hadley, who still hasn't fixed her smudged mascara, texts and ignores the chatter. Then Amber asks each girl to try on the crown. So when it's time, I know which knot to set it to. Courtney's notch 3, Abby notch 3, and Casey 4. Amber asks Casey twice which notch. Except for Courtney, all the contestants agree that they will not try again next year. This is it, Casey says. I've got a degree and I want to work. Abby offers no explanation, but says that she will not be back. Paisley, who will be 18 next summer, says she'll try, and nobody asks Hadley. Side note. Maybe this is because Hadley has remained nearly silent through the whole competition, or because her feelings about queening, either good or bad, have never been voiced. 1 second. Let's see, have never been voiced. So take 1 second to find my spot. Or because everyone realizes that with her mother as president, there's no way she won't be in the ring in 3 years. That is, if there are enough girls for a competition in 3 years. All this talk of future competition seems to ignore the fact that this year the pageant's pulse is a murmur, a gasping 30 beats per minute. MRI's endangered status remains tacit. While the queens are working to promote or preserve their vision of the West, it occurs to me that they could use a little promotion and preservation themselves. If the trend continues, MRI will vanish in no time at all. It will become another cycle of death, or more optimistically, another opportunity for evolution. But where would Courtney or Abby, or even with all her chutzpah and confidence, Casey go? To the openly abhorred beauty queen world? I doubt they'd resort to that. And even if they did, I'm worried about how well they might compete on that scale. To lose all the athleticism and physical rigor and knowledge of Idaho history and industry that goes along with nabbing the buckle crown seems a shame. And let us remember MRI's purpose, to support rodeo, which still thrives in Idaho. The Snake River Stampede is always a sold-out show, the huge arena filled with suburbanites and hipsters and rednecks alike. And so the rodeo world is alive and well, it's just the queen we fear for. Demand persists, but supply is the tricky part. And what if girls stop showing up for competition? What if the Snake River Stampede does without its reigning lady? To allow this partial death, to let rodeos evolve without the queen, is to allow the sport to become even more male-dominated. Or maybe if we allow room for evolution, the whole sport might turn on its head. Women might take it to bronc riding or bull riding or cattle tying. The possibilities could be endless. Usually, Amber doesn't like to think about giving up the crown, she says. Been doing it my whole life after all. The mood of the room has shifted. Exhaustion and nerves have stripped away all pageantry. When asked why they decided to compete, Abby and Courtney say for the experience, for the traveling opportunities, for the scholarship money. Casey does not answer right away. She waits, collects her thoughts, and says with loads of pragmatism that it's a good networking opportunity. Then, with less polish, remembering that the votes have been cast and that judges aren't near, she says earnestly that queening is what she loves best. The horses and late summer nights and hours spent in the corral, there's nothing else she'd rather do. And for the first time all week, Casey looks vulnerable. Then no one speaks, and Hadley peels open a Twix bar, and Paisley sighs, and Amber asks if anyone knows where a fan might be. To close us out, I want to shift towards the end of the book. This book was really born out of a desire to interrogate and understand how place and identity intersect. But as I was writing it, it became increasingly consumed by this idea about how we both occupy and preserve the places that we love. And in the West, I think those two ideas are often in sort of direct conflict. And there's a moment towards the end that I think lives in that tension. So we'll jump there. When I was a child, there was a cattle field that stretched from the Boise River to a steep hillside. Aspen and willows shaded the shore. Sycamores and cottonwoods studded the flats. The field was a palm cupping light. I'm gonna live there, I tell my mother. Now the pasture is a neon-lit cineplex where you can wine and recline through IMAX extravaganzas. I'm the product of a place that is continually transforming and evaporating at breakneck speed, a place that is always under cultural siege. This calcifies the parts that were tender. When people come here pursuing that wild place, the Mustangs bucking through desert, the mountain trails fringed with sun cups, I want to tell them, come, find them, they're here. The elk still rove, the sunsets are still fiery, but there are ugly parts too. Our entitlement and possession yield the worst kind of development. We get stuck in land battles we refuse to quit. We haven't reconciled our conflicting ideas about what the West is or should be. We have failed to live coherently. The transfixing parts remain, but only in fractions. So love the epic, enchanting parts of this place, the most beguiling facets of the old story, but love them with a loose grip. Love them for what they are, remnants to behold because of their scarcity, not as a denial of it. When Ryan and I dream our future, we still dream the same things. I still want to readily connect with wilderness. I still want to live separate from the suburbs, but I want to remember that when we claim a thing, regardless of our intentions, despite our degrees of impact, we change it. 5 houses on a single acre or a single house on 5 acres, it all transforms. When we picture a farmhouse, we quickly fill it with the children we hope to have. There's so much we will show them, we say. I imagine a child beyond the front porch bending to lupine bunches. I see her peeling splinters from front steps. I see her asleep on my shoulder, smelling of lavender and sage. I see my father lifting her to a horse's back and leading her through a corral. I see Ryan teaching her to cast a fly line in a river bend, to keep the wrist straight, to read the water for calm eddies. I see us feeding her potatoes around a campfire, us leading her across wheatgrass meadows, down steep and dusty paths to the cool relief of a shallow creek, us pointing to a deer on a hillside and watching her eyes follow. I want to give her what I had. I want there to be something to give. Thank you. Thanks for joining me for that.
Thanks, Bethany. That was wonderful. That it's hard to imagine. Actually, you know what? You make it really easy to imagine the queen life and the very subtle chaos of that place and that state. So, thank you so much for that reading. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. And as a reminder to those of you watching, you can purchase Anything Will Be Easy after this and books by other festival authors at factandfictionbooks.com. You can also purchase Montana Book Festival merchandise at montanabookfestival.com. There you can also donate so that programming like this can continue into the fall with our MBF Plus events, as well as next year's festival. So thank you again, Bethany, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks, guys.